the comic relief.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if you're jumping on those grenades and you're drinking sour beers for the rest of us, someone's got to do it, and it might as well be you.
Yeah.
I am more than happy to do it myself.
Yeah. Well, I figure if I drink them, then you won't get them, and you'll be miserable, and that'll make me happy. Short-term pain, long-term gain. This is chess, not checkers, buddy.
Yeah. Luke is the only guy I've ever rolled with who actually rolls against me on purpose when we're in the same party.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys were playing Munchkin earlier too, and that's a good game to backstab someone.
Yeah, I play Munchkin like an Albanian gangster. And it's the same way I RP. Like, I'm cutthroat.
When you're not kissing up to the DM.
Yeah. I
really.
want to win, dude.
TJ, love passion fruit. When there are a lot of hops that throw that passion fruit flavor. Certainly a favorite of mine. I'm not one for fruity beers, but I think there are certain flavors that work well, and some of the Australia or the New Zealand hops throw that passion fruit bomb into the
Fuggles. Like a New Zealand Fuggle does that.
Yeah, New Zealand Fuggle will do that.
Is that a brand name or a beer type?
They're species. They're actually a species.
Yeah, Fuggle is a genus. It's a subgenus of hop.
Yeah. It's a variant of the hop family. There's probably 300 or 400 active cultivars that are used now, and to the point where some of them have become commodity. It's actually last year it was very, very difficult to get your hand on Cascades after about April.
Speaking of which, Greg, my LHBS has got I don't know, 5 pounds of them just sitting there that we could procure if we wanted them.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
LBS is local brewing supplier?
Local homebrew store.
Oh, HBS. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's very much like your LGS. The LHBS is a critical part of the equation.
Well, yeah, you guys were talking about just going there and hanging out, talking with the owner.
Absolutely.
That's what happens at a game store. It's a hobby. Yeah. It's a passion.
It's very much, there are a lot of parallels that one can draw.
Absolutely. And we were... Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's the same in any hobby type pastime, whether it's RC planes or, bike building or whatever, right? Or the LCBO. That's another good one. You find camaraderie and you find people willing to, like we're doing here, expand that base of knowledge and understanding for the purposes of making a better end product, whether that be at the table or whether that be in the brewery or on the airstrip.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that felt very welcoming. I don't know, at least to me, because both Greg and I have been spending time in LGSs long before we were hanging out in homebrew supply stores.
That's right.
Yeah. So, like, I have a bag of Magic over there that's got a bunch of legacy decks and some modern decks in it. So, yeah. So I think those parallels, like Greg says, it's about hobbying, not necessarily what the specific hobby is.
Yeah.
Well, because actually that's a good bridge into this next segment here, when we're talking about things like culture or how to, as in a societal norm, or I guess a culture in what is physically produced by alcohol or its byproducts. Let's get into that, right? We have in the last segment you had talked about where, depending on what you use or how you brew it, you can make a lethal poison or a blinding poison, something along those lines. If you are a brewer, what could that empower you to do? What are some creative uses for your tools, your knowledge, your skills? With a distinction, I think we should throw in that in the player's handbook there is technically something called a poisoner's, I think like a poisoner's kit. Poisoner's kit includes the vials, chemicals, and other equipment necessary for the creation of poisons. Proficiency with this kit lets you add your proficiency bone. Okay, but I think that's something along the lines of like
how much is that
extracting
kit?
spider venom or like dragon glands. Not necessarily, or like
please tell me you said glands.
Yes,
not
glands.
Okay.
Not without the D.
Because that got me.
Although, look, maybe it's poisonous. I don't know. It's a fictional world. Or in Chinese medicine, people extract the without the D, and we'll dry it and powder it and whatever. So
there's a bad joke there, and I'm not going for it.
Yeah, and it revolves around don't ever extract the D.
Yeah. So I think we have.
I'm sorry. I'm going to sit over here.
I think we have kind of a. There's 3 different ways we could approach this. Maybe a 4th if you count a healer's kit. But we have brewer's supplies. We have a poisoner's kit, and then we have something called an herbalism kit. It contains a variety of instruments such as clippers, mortar and pestle, pouches, and vials used by herbalists to create remedies and potions. And proficiency with this, potions of healing, etc. So, without necessarily getting totally in the territory of being a poisoner or a poison manufacturer, or without someone who, like, I grow rosemary in my garden, and I dry it and grind it, and I'll make a potion with that, or I'll just make a really good meal. Can we explore what brewer supplies will let us do? And if it's not too complicated or to work it in or out, I would also like to talk a little bit about some kind of brewing culture. Now, obviously, look, every race and culture might have its thing. On the Man Show, you had the Ziggy Zaggy, you have chants and all that. But if there's ways that maybe are more universal or things to consider if you're building your world around a culture, what to do. But I'd like to start with what are the mechanics? What can we do with brewer's supplies that would be feasible for a brewer to employ in traditional or creative uses?
I think probably talking the poison side, really the worst you can accomplish as a brewer is a good dose of food poisoning. So you're certainly not going to brew up anything that's going to, innately do harm. But I really do like the concept of tying that herbalist's tactic into the brewing tradition, and that is a connection that I think does make sense.
And I think it exists. I think
the
step from one to the other is a very
small step.
Yeah.
It would be very similar techniques in terms of procuring herbs and preparing them for cooking or for stewing or for whatever. Including those into a beverage makes good sense.
And I think probably because the thing that you're producing, because somebody that's making beer wouldn't want in any way to be associated with poison.
Mm-hmm.
I think a brewer would be a herbalist brewer or an herbalist poisoner. I don't think that you would be a brewer poisoner.
Yeah, I'd say
nobody's going to drink your beer as a replacement for this.
Seeing that on your business card, that might not necesarily get you a bunch of business.
So, to speak to what TJ was mentioning in the chat, like methanol on its own is a good poison. It's a slower acting poison, obviously, and it's one that can be remedied, as opposed to isopropyl and those. But isopropyl would never have been is never a byproduct that could accidentally be manufactured.
No, you gotta be paying attention to make that stuff. Yeah.
But methanol is a ready byproduct. Now, in a brewed beverage like beer, it's a non-issue. Because methanol, the mechanism by which methanol infects the body or affects the body is immediately offset. And in fact, the remedy for methanol poisoning
is ethanol.
Is ethanol.
Huh.
The way to cure you of methanol poisoning is to give you another drink.
Yeah.
But a good one. And so the reason that the one place where that becomes an issue is in distillation, because the first product of distillation is methanol. It's referred to as the heads. It's the first part of the alcohol to evaporate into the vapor column in a still. And as such, that's why you'll see when people distill alcohol, the first, usually 5%, Luke, somewhere in there?
Anywhere from 5 to 10%.
Yeah, 5 to 10%, it gets dumped.
Yeah, it's useless
because it's dangerous. Yeah, it's dangerous, and it doesn't taste good either. But
it could be cleaning solution.
You could use it for absolutely. It could be an alcohol cleaner for sure.
It could be an alcohol cleaner. It could be a campfire starter fluid.
Sure, yeah, and in this context, that would probably make sense.
Yeah, but you'll see like a distiller, and to this day will still pour off in a small glass, and they'll hold their eye over the glass. And if their eye starts to water and creates pain, that's still the heads.
Oh, wow. As a modern practice in breweries, they do that? Is there not a long-term...
In distillation. Yeah, in distilleries, yeah.
Your
every batch is slightly
detector.
Yeah, every batch is slightly different.
Yeah.
Because the yeast is so subject to change, as is the grain, as is, all of that stuff. So getting back to the original point, it's possible to make, for an industrious brewer with a little bit of time, a Molotov cocktail is not an impossible thing to create.
Oh no, would be easy,
right? But certainly wouldn't be in the creation of the foodstuff beer.
No,
but were one to prepare in town for some kind of assault, to distill some alcohol from that same source, that's not totally unreasonable if there's enough time.
Yeah, like the person, if your campaign is looking for like fire bombs or like whatever you're going to call a Molotov cocktail, you're not going to the Armorer, you're going to the brewery.
Brewery.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely something that could be made and was made.
Oh, guaranteed it was made.
Since the beginning of distillation, which would have, as soon as you talk in a campaign about, whether it's rum or whatever drink makes its way into these campaigns, and they do, then there had to have been some distillation process. So Greg, there was a way to make fire.
I have a question for you, Greg, that I don't even know the answer to. Not that that's shocking. What in real life, what was the time from a commonly practiced beer making by everybody to a distillation?
So sort of when did distillation become an active thing?
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to think really hard.
Just type it. Yeah.
It is old. I know it's old.
Like Egypt or Mongols or like
1st century AD.
Where? Yeah.
2nd century BC. 2nd century BC. It was done in Egypt. In Alexandria.
All right.
And in
Thanks, Plunder.
And in Israel. What
Distillation
became
was
Israel?
introduced after the Crusades. The Arabs used it for perfumes and essences, which makes total sense.
Yep. Aqua Vitae, though, and that was sort of the beginning of drinkable stuff. That looks to be sort of
Akkadian text.
12th century, 12th, 13th century. Yeah.
BC.
So there you go. So that would have been the first drinkable, but you could certainly have made, something flammable, as early as 200 BC. So what was the purpose of that? Well, then that's a whole other thing, right? Yeah. Wow.
Cool.
So
because that'll give you sort of historical. When is your campaign taking place?
Yeah, when we talk about the typical dwarves, elves, and kobolds, obviously that's not a human time frame or a time scale.
Yeah.
But if we're playing in the realm of Hercules and Xena, distillation.
We're also in the Iron Age, or beyond the Iron Age, and one would argue that the Iron Age was ancient, right? Because the elves have been making steel for years and years and years. So perhaps it's just simply a different timeline. Maybe that's if you got to the Iron Age, you probably have come up with a bunch of these things.
Yeah, if you got I imagine that distilling became a thing in the Copper Age.
I would imagine, yeah, I would imagine.
Let's see what the favorite boxes brings to us one of
that. Wouldn't surprise me if that particular discovery in the Copper Age is what catapulted them into the next stage.
Yeah, for sure.
On a real quick note, Mr. Plunderloot, thank you very much for sponsoring 2 boxes. Let me know which 2 you want me to pop open, and I'll do that as we're discussing these options. You do make up a good point. I as you were talking about it, I want to make sure I don't want to get people thinking that brewers or the profession of brewing should be associated with poisoning, terrorism, burning people alive. But in what we're discussing, right, different cultures, different times, maybe even accidentally through a process of discovery, what can we use instead of just making beer? Because you make beer, you sell it, or you drink it, or you do the things we're talking about. You use it to replace water. Is there a way that we could collect the gases and use those in other ways? Could we turn it into something like you're talking about, a Molotov cocktail? Or depending on, well, it sounds like there's a soft limit to brewing because distillation really is the next step.
Yeah, there really is. I think brewing as a practice, particularly in RP, has to be treated as a social element, as a cultural element, and as a sustenance element. I agree with you,
Monica.
Right? Beyond... certainly when we start talking about the ability to distill, to create alcohol for the purposes of defense or otherwise, that is the next step. But I think realistically, when you talk about those, in a game setting bearing brewing capability, the value of that has to be limited sort of to those arenas of social sustenance and practice, because there is perhaps what's the word I'm looking for? There's a diligence to learning that process, and
especially if it's replacing your water source, as you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. There's
on the scale, like the brewer would be held in the community at a like the in-town brewery and distillery would be held as more as important, if not more important, than the bakers and the armorers. They would all be you wouldn't have the character attributes of somebody that was a poison maker.
Well, just looking at the title, you're a brew master. you're not a blacksmith or a cooper. You are a master of brewing. It seems to carry a particular, I don't know, acceleration or an extra weight to it, that there is something bigger than just a title. It's a rank. It's a position of trust or something along those lines.
And yeah, if you think, Pneumatica, if you think like the catapults and trebuchets, if they're launching something that's on fire at the siege, there's distillation.
No.
Likely, dude.
Oil. Requires no distillation. You just got to melt
That's
a
fair.
cow.
That's fair.
Melt
Can
a
you
cow.
imagine that? Can you imagine that? A flaming ball of tallow? Oh.
Well, I mean, think
The
about
smell-
castle sieges. Boiling oil was poured over the side on
Yeah.
the invaders, and
And generally it was either pork or beef fat, right? Because those were the fatty animals that you had around to produce that kind of fat. I guess there could have been coastal whale blubber cannon or oil buckets, but I mean that's really because extraction of petrochemical oil. There are a few places in the world where it seeps out of the ground, but certainly not in any quantity. So that vat of boiling oil, I don't think it was for chicken wings. It was probably rendered fat.
yeah.
It was rendered fat from a cow or something equivalent.
Although in
That
a
guy's
dire
cool.
situation, if you're undergoing a siege, I mean, if you have water and you have silos with grain to withstand, you could make beer for sustenance, or I guess if you could render it into something else, you might be able to defend yourself.
And again, this is, we get back to that conversation about the fact that beer itself was used as currency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was rum. And so if you have the ability to distill, you will create the beer for sustenance, and you will create the whiskey or the spirits as a means of providing payment.
So and that exactly, and that sort of to my mind speaks to the position in the community and what other associated professions that a brewer or brew master would be associated with.
I think
and
we
it
just
would-
figured out what the moat was for. Oh no, you put double buckets in it.
So maybe you have to brew something a little stronger for using that. Real quick, let me go over Plunderloot's box because I think you are into something because of the role of brewmaster. Plunderloot, we cracked open a Sun Soul monk, an apprentice wizard, and a fiend warlock, and the final piece in your first box of 2 is a shield guardian. And those are a lot of fun if you've ever encountered those in role-playing. A shield guardian. A construct that has a medallion. It's kind of a robot that you can control.
He's cool.
And so, Mr. Plunderloot, let me know what you want out of there. And while I'm cracking open your second box, I think... Well, let's go back to what we did last night with our village. If you're the brewmaster, it's your responsibility to make this. You are a huge economic force in organizing labor, in making economic decisions, in forming contracts with farmers and teamsters and military or like guard or security forces. You're the center of a lot of activity. Even if you're not making the law, your activity alone is really what's helping to sustain the life of the population, let alone anything else.
Yeah, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, I don't think it would be totally out of place whatsoever for the guy that owns the brew house to also be a prominent member of, like, city council or the mayor or one of the people that makes the decisions for all of the other people in this time period.
I would say, given the resource requirements, given the fundamental infrastructure infrastructure requirements that would come as a result of being that position, it's probably the lord of the land around wherever this is. Like I can see this being, when we talk about, storming a castle and hitting the dungeons, one of those rooms should be a brewery.
Yeah.
And certainly
at the very least, it should be a grain store.
Grain storage and lagering, right, underground. So I think that's a very reasonable place to start with that. I am going to have to run, guys.
Okay.
11 o'clock my time, but Luke, I'm sure you'll be able to keep everybody happy.
Thank you very much.
And I want to thank you very, very much, Maddie, for having us on board and letting us espouse beer nerdery. And for anybody who wants to talk more about the more contemporary side of beer and brewing, Saturday nights at Rysky Business is where we hang out. So.
Yeah, please feel free to drop that link in again. And if you guys are broadcasting, I should have you on to pick you up to host, but you can always post in our channel too, on our Discord, to help bring some eyeballs to you.
For sure.
But
so
yeah,
thank
you so much for your time. And hey, nerd, I prefer the term intellectual badass, as the shirt says.
Thank you. I'm going to get that on a T-shirt. I'm absolutely going to get that on a T-shirt. Thanks again, Maddie. Luke, I'll leave you to it.
Yeah, man.
Have fun for the rest of the show.
Absolutely.
And
always good hanging out too,
guys. On another set of tubes.
Cheers. And Greg, I'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah,
you will, my friend. I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.
Plunder Loot, real quick here, out of your box, we've opened up so far a goblin with a sword, an orc with a warhammer. Man, this is a lot of bread and butter monsters here. After that, we have a sea hag. A sea hag.
Get out of my swamp, you kids.
Second generation. Produce mesure other worldly terrors. Repenter.
Oh snap! Macabre Derek just sponsored 5 boxes of Monster Menagerie 2. So as we continue talking, we're gonna be cracking open some monsters here and seeing what's in here. Now, Plunder Loot, the last figure out of this box is, for your consideration, a warg. W-O-R-G, warg. Kind of like a direwolf. Goblins are known to ride them. And if I recall correctly, wargs they have a bit of a sentience to them. So let me know, Plunder Loot, what you want. You want the warg? Okay, that was quick. So, sir, a warg and a shield guardian are going to be added to your box o' minis. That I'm hanging on to, dude. And maybe others would want to trade as well.
I want the Galeb Dur.
Oh, dude, Galeb Durs are, well, I'd say they rock, but that's just an unnecessary pun. But yeah, those are nice. They're not just an average elemental. Anyway, you and I agree. Galeb Durs are good stuff.
Yeah.
Diadem says, oh, you want the orc with the warhammer? Sure, I'll set that aside for you, and I'll get you a quote on that. And then, so we have 1 in the box. This is going to make 2. 3, 4, and 5. That means after Derek is done, I have 1 box of Monster Menagerie 2 left. And then I will resupply and cycle Dragon Heist, which we just popped open, and Plunder Loot got the first pick out of there. Okay. So
that's epic, dude.
We have been. I actually like. At first, I thought, well, these are 2 topics, and I think we could discuss them separately. But I think we've wound in a basic cultural element to the fact that you may not be an alchemist in so much that you're mixing, brimstone and bad eyes in order to make something or another there. But you do have the tools and the capability of producing something that, well, you hold a lot of people's lives in your hand if they're relying on you.
Absolutely. Like farmers are beholden to you because you're buying their grain, and your waste is feeding their cattle.
That's such a and how many of us have ever considered that before, right? You're like, oh well, you're a brewer.
Even modern breweries, all of their spent grain feeds pigs, chickens, and cows. Like when you sit down for a chicken dinner, it was drinking pre-beer its entire life.
Huh.
And that's sort of the holistic full circle economy. Like every single city of any size at this period needs this to function.
In this moment,
Last M2.
Mr. Plunderloot, thank you for adopting that last box of Monster Manual. Then, I'll get into that after we crack open Derek's. I feel, number one, this is why D&D and role playing is amazing, because of the things you learn along the journey. And have we ever stopped to consider that the sheer economic power of this presumably unelected official? It's not a classic noble. It's not a classic landlord. It's not a classic elected person or a folk hero, or even in a sense, maybe more along the lines of a guild, maybe a guild artisan. But it's something
there
so
would
simple.
Absolutely be brewers guilds.
I'm baffled that for as long as I've been playing, I've never really considered just how powerful that person can be. So as a PC or an NPC, if you aren't powerful at the start, if you learned then how to use brewer's supplies, that would probably put you above, well, maybe just the average household beer maker that's providing water for their family effectively. But that's an intrinsic way in to make a living, or to have these political access to different.
Absolutely.
Derek, we have popped open a human monk, a giant rat. What is this, dude? A bugbear with a battle axe. Dude looks like an executioner.
Let me see that again.
A bugbear with a battle axe. He's wearing like an executioner hood and a black leather apron. Big old axe on him.
That is wicked cool.
And lastly, out of this box, we have opened a... can I find it? I hope it's in here. It should be. Here we go. An iron golem. It has a little bit of rust on it, so you might have to use some WD-40. But you have an iron golem in here. So which mini do you want from this box, Derek? The golem, the bugbear, the monk, or the rat?
He obviously wants the iron golem.
Iron golem, yep. All right, so Derek, the iron golem will go in your box, sir. And you have this. You have this brewing also.
Hey, One Crit. My name's Luke.
Oh, yes. By the way, we did get rated. Thank you for that. One Crit, this is Luke. He is a... Are you a brewer? Are you like a hobbyist? How do you want this to be conveyed?
Yeah, I'm a home brewer. I'm a beer nerd.
Beer nerd. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, not a nerd. As the shirt says, I prefer the term an intellectual badass.
No, I'm totally a beer nerd, dude. I like to call it a semi-professional alcoholic, but
Pneumatica
not
says
really an
trivia.
alcoholic.
There were brewers' guilds in London as early as the Tudor era.
Yep.
Originally, ale makers and beer makers had separate guilds. Oh, you know what? That was something too. Talking about culture or terminology, or what would be the difference? But like we talk about beer, what's the difference between an ale, a lager, or some things like that?
Beer, as you think of it, is an ale. Beer, as you drink it, at least in North America, is a lager. At a very basic level, it's what yeast you use. Greg was alluding to what bugs you feed it or what yeast you feed it. Lagers have to be kept much cooler than ales. They're typically a clearer, and I can't really speak to the historical significance of when those two things became culturally different.
Okay.
It's the exact same process. An IPA is an ale. Most accessible beer that you can make easy will be an ale.
Okay.
Because you can make it warmer than you can a lager. Lagering requires a cavern.
Oh.
But it's all the exact same process. It's just how it's the same product with the same ingredients. It's just a different process.
Derek, and I'm not to again. I want to go over through his boxes since we're kind of doing a dual function here on the stream. Derek, we started off with an orc that has a sword, and then we went to a bugbear with an axe. Next up, we have a black pudding. Actually, this is what we were talking about yesterday. Could possibly mutate in the barrel and accidentally come out if something was going on. But you can. It's big enough you can put a figure in the middle of the black pudding and go from there. Which, by the way, that would be a good adventuring hook. Someone's been messing with the yeast.
Did you just pull a black pudding while I was talking?
Yeah, I pulled a black pudding.
Oh.
Someone messed around and mutated the yeast, and it's causing puddings and oozes to come out of the barrel, and that's wreaking havoc in the town, and obviously the adventurers need to find out what's happening. And lastly, out of this box is
that's the black pudding that ate Tasha Yar.
Oh,
bastard!
Oh, rip Tasha. A gold dragon wormling. Gold dragon wormling, a black pudding, an orc with a sword, or a bugbear with an axe. Derek said he's a brewmaster. I'm a mixologist, which requires half the talent, and much like brewmasters, it is as simple or as complicated as you want to be. Pneumatica continues another bit of trivia. Up until the 18th century, women were actively involved in brewing. An alewife was the feminine form of brewmaster. Ah, okay. So
many cultures, only women are the brewmasters. There's many cultures to this day that only women. My local craft brewery, head brewers, two women. It's a very accepting community. It's sort of a gender blind community.
Yeah, in fact, if I recall, and again, I'm remembering my lessons from my professors here. In Peru, it's because of the enzyme balance between men and women
in their mouth.
Yeah, in their mouth, and they would actually spit to start the culture inside that brew.
Absolutely. I don't know if you're taking notes or you have an amazing. You hit it right on the head, man.
you can see on the channel what notes I have open. I have the notes that are collapsed down into, from last night. But what I have open is what I have, and it's because, look, if you're taking the time to be my guest, and I want to learn also, not just host you or to have this be a commercial transaction or whatever. I'm here to listen. You guys are living a world.
Can I have the dragon? I'm kidding.
Oh. You guys are doing something that I've never done, and yet I've been curious about. But much like gaining experience points in role playing, you how are you going to get those? Oftentimes, you listen to a story by someone else, or you read a book, or you find out about life in other ways. And so I do try to listen as much as I can to you all, or for you talk to the people in chat over here. When someone comes back, even if they've been gone for a couple months, I've tried to take some time to, number one, to welcome them when they first came by, and number two, try and remember who they are, what they like. Oh yeah, you came aboard when we made your character, or things along those lines. And heck, you guys are an excellent example. You stopped by the channel months ago, and you saw who I was and what I did. It resonated with you in your own personal ways, and over time, we're talking more, and look where it's culminated.
Absolutely, man. It's cool.
Derek, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Karen. No, I'm good.
Okay. Derek, for your next box, we have cracked open a human monk. A human monk. Actually, this is a model from the art in the player's handbook. We have cracked open a halfling rogue. A halfling rogue. After that, we have a kobold with a spiked club. Or actually, you know what? This guy's wearing a helmet. This is this is a kobold with an axe. I'm sorry, not just a spiked club. A kobold with an axe. And lastly, Derek, in your box, in your third box here, we have a planetar angel. A planetar angel. Diadems, you want that bugbear with the axe? I can put that in your pile and get you a quote.
That angel's dope.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like some like Art Deco kind of like sculpture from,
Yeah, it should be on the side of a building.
Yeah, it really should. It has that like perfect, it's
I want that in my pile. Jesus.
Now, I'm curious, being the guest here and being the professional, I guess getting questions or feedback from the community or myself, is there anything that you have been able to take away from this interview as well? Aside from that awesome idea to make that IRL trudge around for 3 days and make your own beer to prove brewing supplies exist and can work.
Yeah, no, I would be happy if it improves. I'm sure it'll add depth if considered to DMs, and it'll also allow players to think of the worlds that they're inhabiting a little bit deeper than just a hack and slash. Like the economy is based on this thing, like in a Dungeons and Dragons time period. Absolutely, the economy is if not primarily driven, then certainly adjunctly. Is that correctly?
Well, yeah, like in association with, or as a secondary, yeah.
So like that's the town, like the local watering hole and you said it yourself, the guy sitting at the bar with a flagon of ale builds this insanely rich world that you're in. And if you have brewing supplies, and we've sort of touched on those and what that means, it does nothing but increase the depth of your RP, which is always good.
And beer is not just dude, we're getting drunk in the inn, or it's treated like frat brothers at a party in college, where it's just a consumable that you're going to rent for a couple hours and pee out later. It actually is a culture. It's the core of the town. You better defend that brewery from attack, because that is your livelihood.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if there's a siege, the beer the beer making is in the center of the town behind the third set of walls, because like all they have to do to smoke you out is to shoot your beer supply, because now you don't have anything to drink, so you can't drink the water or you die.
Yeah. Wow. And for those of you who are out there watching, then too, I hope that you have enjoyed this series of interviews, that you have learned something IRL, or it's given you great ideas for running a PC, an NPC, for designing a world, or a portion or a big part of it. I hope that you found inspiration and education in what it is that we're doing here.
Like that city boss, that dude that is trying to call the shots and ruin the day of your NPCs. He's the guy that owns the brewery. He's the guy that's trying to save your characters. He's the guy that's brewing the beer. He's the most powerful merchant in the town.
Yeah.
He's certainly one of the richest.
Whew. In summary, real quick, for Derek's latest box, you have a ghast, a goblin with an axe, a bugbear with an axe, and the big piece out of here was a stone golem.
Yeah, that's Stone Golem's boss.
It kind of looks like some like Incan carving come to life, and
I think it looks like the art on Sundering Titan in Magic.
Let's see. Derek wants a stone golem. Need to beat someone to death soon. Well, hey, you know what? If you're a brewer, you get a stone golem, and that'll grind your grain. 24
It'll
hours.
also protect your brewery.
And, oh yeah.
But that's another thing, dude. Is like the security. Like there were some great comments last night about you need to protect the fields and protect the brewery, and like beer is the commodity, or like it has byproducts of creating it, like the yeast, the marmite, the trub, the whatever you want to call it. Like maybe that's liquid gold orc food.
Yeah.
So you make a deal with 300 orc barbarian crazy necromancers or whatever the hell you want your campaign, but you can weave that in, and that's their plot point for their loyalty to you. Is that you're their primary food source.
Derek, yeah, the orc idea, where orcs might not, because look at this too. And by the way, Luke, this is another good part of economic talk. Not all races or cultures accept currency, even if it is a precious metal, because a precious metal they can't eat. They can't raise children off that. And so by trading them a commodity like beer or byproducts or even just grain, that is what they want.
In your brewer's kit, like that 10 pounds of grain on the back of your tank, it could be the difference between a TPK and Happily Ever After.
And speaking of culture, then too, along these lines, as we're kind of getting we're getting into the twilight of part 2 of the broadcast. If you carry beer on you, for many, well, I mean, basing it off of how many cultures in our human real life world brew beer and drink beer, almost all of them, as we were talking about yesterday. If you bring a mini keg or a little barrel or something of beer, and you encounter goblins, orcs, even hostile bandits or something, you may be able to use that as a way to sit down and actually talk things out over by offering some of this beer as a way to show, I drink beer, you drink beer, let's drink beer together. Especially because I'm a brewer and I should be trusted that I won't poison you, because I'll tell you what, I'll be happy to take the first sip out of my mug. Let alone if you want to. You can watch me all you want.
It can also be you, like that 5-gallon barrel of beer. It would have like a 10 gold piece value, maybe more.
Well, in
like that would be an amazing. Here, take this barrel of beer as a thank you for letting us pass your gates into your stronghold.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it could absolutely be a greasing of the palms.
Yep. And it'll spread your word and reputation, too. Being
Absolutely.
a brewmaster. Real quick, Derek, you have a very interesting box here. We started off with this really neat elf fighter character. Very good detail, by the way, in this. After that, we're jumping up into all kinds of things. You have to choose from next a white dragon wormling. A white dragon wormling. The elf fighter. A warg. W-O-R-G. Not to be confused with wort that we're talking about, which is pre-beer, if I'm remembering what you're talking about.
Yep. W-O-R-T, yep.
And that's how I try and remember stuff, too, is I try and repeat it and make sure I'm using it in subsequent sentences. Or
Sweet.
Lastly, Derek, if you prefer instead, there is a mind flayer that has a claw. A mind flayer with a claw. Make your decision, sir. A mind flayer, a white dragon wormling, a warg, or the elf fighter? Derek says brains. All right, so I think Derek is going to choose the Illithid with the claw. Plunderer, you want me to set aside the white dragon for you also? Okay. All right. And so these other ones are going to go into the general mix. And then our last box of Monster Manual here. Luke, if you can give me 1 more minute to open this up for Mr. Plunderloot.
Dude, I'm stoked. What are you talking about? I'm watching it with anticipation.
This will finish out the brick that we had in just today. I'll have to see if I can sneak in another order at the end of the like tomorrow. It might come in on Monday. We'll see. I'll stay in touch. I do have Monster Menagerie 1 at the store. I didn't bring it home, so I do have Monster Menagerie 1's figures as well. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it here.
Dude, your viewers are sick, dude. We opened a brick of minis tonight. Like, that's awesome.
I am humbled on a daily basis by the ideas, the creativity, and the generosity that people who are attracted to this hobby have. Just as you were talking about in your video, you know, it's tough to meet a brewer who's, pardon my French-Canadian, an a-hole, E-H-H-O-L-E.
A-hole. You at the blue line, eh, my friend? Not the next door.
You kind of sound like Quint from Jaws there for a moment. But
23 men go into the water, Chief, and 18 men come out. The ice cream men, he get the rest.
The Indianapolis speech is amazing, and all of you should watch it. You can find it on YouTube. Just type in Indianapolis speech. You watch that, and you want an exercise in storytelling at your tabletop?
Jaws is the best movie ever made. It's the best movie ever made.
All right, Plunder Loot. Forsaken, I do have unpainted minis. I can take a picture of my wall at them because I just got in paint sets and other things. I do have unpainted minis at the store, too. Derek is telling you that your native accent is slipping.
Je dois donc changer de lettres, monsieur.
Plunder Loot, my friend, you are going to have a pretty cool box to look through as well. Your first option is a Sahagin, or a Sahwagan, or a Sahagin, if we want to talk with an outrageous French accent.
That's absolutely what people from Montreal sound like. Absolutely.
They sound outrageous. Apparently has active camo here because of the color green, so you're just going to have to refer to the website for this one. Hey, good to see you.
I can do that accent, Derek, but not without being entirely racially insensitive, so I don't think that I'll be doing it, but I can.
Next up, we have a Kobold Fighter, and this is the one with the spiked club.
What was the one with the trident?
That was a Sahagin, or a Sahwagan, or however you'd like to pronounce that one. After that, we have
Badass is how I'd like to pronounce that.
A Gnoll with a flail. This is even though it's a medium-sized creature, this is a big piece, and it has a flail. My cat is trying to get my attention. What do you want, buddy? Hi. Or lastly, Mr. Plunder Loot, if you didn't want the Gnoll with a flail, the Sahagin with a trident, or a Kobold with a spiked club, perhaps instead you would like a Beholder. Dun, da, da, da. He looks kind of he looks kind of disgusted, like, oh, plebeian adventurers, how dare you? One crit. The name is Raichi. Xanathar's coloring, yes. Although this one, Xanathar was larger and also had rings on. He had 2 or 3 rings. This one is well, he's naked. Don't look. It's a naked beholder.
Absolutely. Forsaken, you can make beer with different fruits. You can make the process of beer making is taking sugar water and making it into alcohol. You can, if you've got a cherry tree in your backyard, you can take some grain, throw some cherries into the mix, and now you've got a cherry beer. You can use any fruits, vegetables not so much, but fruits. Some, like I've had.
Real quick, Luke, if I can interrupt. Sawfang, thank you for that raid with 16 people.
Dude.
Thank you for coming by with that. Hopefully I'm not saying this and they're caught up in an ad or something, right?
Yeah, probably.
You got to run before you're late for work. Yeah, be well, Sawfang. Thank you so much for stopping by. And with that raid,
Thanks,
we're cracking open minis. We're talking about beer and brewing. If you guys have questions, Luke, if you still have a little bit of time, we may be officially ending segment 2, but if you want to stick around and still talk on camera and whatnot, I'd love to have you.
I'm down. Yeah, man, I'm down.
Excellent. Then I think we'll say hi to everyone. We'll officially conclude part 2, but we'll just kind of go into part 3 afterwards here.